I just love it when the weather gets nice. I go outside and grab my sketchbook and my pencils or my pens, sit around and just look at the sky, at the incredible trees with all their texture and the grasses. Hi, I'm Barrett Techmeyer, and I'm a watercolor artist here in Kansas City. And today we're going to be having a class about how to draw in plein air. And plein air is a French word. It means in the open. So grab your pencils and get ready because I'm going to teach you a few techniques. Using the outdoors as inspiration, this class will focus on drawing techniques in plein air or in the open air. Students will work on observational skills, light and cast shadow, textural qualities, and the perception of depth. We're going to begin by looking at some possible supplies for drawing. We're going to make a viewfinder, which is a nice tool to have when you are drawing outside. We're going to create some cast shadows. Then finally we're going to actually draw outdoors. Then we're going to look at some alternative techniques for drawing outdoors. The first is water-soluble pen and water brush. The second, stick and ink. And finally, we will review and wrap up. When you talk about drawing outdoors, you have to talk about drawing pencils. And this is a Prismacolor Premier set of 18. Now, this is the ultimate set. You could also just use a number 2 pencil. But I like this set because of the number of pencils it has. It has very soft pencils and it has harder pencils. And this is what I draw with all the time. It's a mechanical pencil. This is a unique Kuru Toga HB 0.5. And again, it's a nice to have, but I use it all the time. It comes with some pencil lead, and you can adjust the weight of your lead just by purchasing a different kind of lead and putting that into the pencil, which is a very nice option. Every time I do one of these videos, I talk about the Etcher sketchbook because I love it so much. Etcher is a nice company, and they have all these incredible drawing and painting tools. This happens to be my favorite. The Etcher sketchbook is made up of 140-pound watercolor paper, and it is cold press, so it has a little bit of bump to it. It's nice for pen and ink, and it's also nice for watercolor. It also is 100% cotton, which means that it's going to soak up the paint really, really well and do very well with pen and ink. Now let's talk about pens. This is one I use a lot. This is a disposable fountain pen from Pilot Varsity. It has a very nice dark ink in it. You don't have to worry about filling it up, so that's what I like about it best. Then these are my favorites. I use these all the time. These are Micron pens. These are still disposable, but they have archive ink in them, which means it's permanent. The Varsity does not. The Varsity is water soluble. But these, you can use them and paint over the top of them. They come in various different sizes. The 05 is my favorite. And the tips are nice metal. And the ink flows very nicely. Now, if you're more into fountain pens, this is one to get. This is a Lamy All-Star. You have to fill up the ink well. However, it is nice to draw with. Then we have erasers. This is the kneaded eraser. I use a kneaded eraser a lot. And then you have a white magic rub. This is probably the one that you're most familiar with. And I do a lot of printmaking. This is actually just a scrap from a printmaking block, and it works just fine. This is water-soluble graphite. The first one is a Lyra stick. The Lyra stick I will be demonstrating with when we go out and do our drawing outside because I like it so much. You can draw with it and then take water and it will look like pen and ink. And then you also have the general sketch and wash pencil. So the water brushes are nice if you don't want to take water with you when you're going outdoors. They have a well that fills up with water and a brush on the top of it so that you can use it. Now this is a nice to have. This is a leather pen and pencil case from Vintage Crafts. I got this off of Etsy. I like the way that the leather strap wraps around it, and then on the inside you can carry all your pens. So the supplies you're going to need to start making your viewfinder are going to be a pair of scissors, some masking tape. Cellophane tape would probably work okay too. You're going to need some thick paper. I've got cardstock here. That seems to work okay. And the most important thing is you're going to need some dental floss, about 4 pieces of dental floss. Each of them cut about, 3.5 inches long. Depends on how big you want your viewfinder to be. So this is what the viewfinder is going to look like when you're done. And you'll notice that it's divided up just like the graph was when we did the rule of thirds. And so these are your intersecting points here. So you would hold this up when you were looking at something outside, and you can move it around to kind of figure out what the best composition would be. And it's a nice handy tool to have. So let me show you how this is going to work. Move all this stuff out of the way. And the first thing you're going to do is just cut out a rectangle from your cardstock and just fold it down the middle. Then you can take it and cut another rectangle out of the center. Be careful to leave some nice wide sides and not to make those too thin, because that's where you're going to put the tape. And sometimes I get this crooked when I'm cutting out. Let's open it up and see if that's going to work. Yeah, that should be fine. Really doesn't matter if this isn't perfect. Like I said, I've got it, it's a little bit off right there, but that'll be okay. Then you're going to take your floss and you're going to lay 2 pieces of floss down this way, and you will adjust these as you're going, but just getting them kind of in the right position here. And they're going to stick to my fingers and cause problems, but that's okay. Then you're going to take a small piece of tape. I like to do this one piece at a time, or one side at a time. This side looks like it's in the right place, so I'm going to go ahead and put that tape down there. Then I'm going to pull these out. Yeah, that's better. And on this side, I'm going to go ahead and tape that down. Again, you can adjust this. You can pull the tape up and adjust if it's not in the right place. Then I'm going to do my 2 verticals. It's better to have your floss too long rather than have it too short, because it'll be easier for you to move it around later. Same thing, taking 2 pieces of tape. 1 piece of tape at the top, like this. And 1 piece of tape at the bottom, like that. And I've got it. Now I just need to trim off my corners here. And then I'll show you how I used it. So in this class I was having my students do some drawings of the sculpture park, and some of the trees and different things you can see. This is the sculpture park with a walkway coming down that way. And what I did was I would hold this in front of me and really kind of look at it, move it around so I could see, okay, that's going, now, not quite right, but if I held this really close to my eyes, I would be able to see that this tree right here would be really good for me to have that as my center of interest. So that one of those lines on my viewfinder was right there. And so I did some sketches, and this is probably the third or the fourth sketch that I did to get everything just in the right position, my shadows and everything else. And then this was my final painting that I did here. And you can see incorporating the different values, and this still being my center of interest, just like that. When you're drawing outdoors, cast shadows is a very important skill to have. You're going to see cast shadows on buildings, you're going to see cast shadows on roads, you're going to see cast shadows on trees. So for today, we are going to focus on what a tree might look like with a cast shadow, but you will be able to use these techniques on everything that you see when you're drawing outside. I'm going to start by drawing these cylinders, and we're going to pretend that these cylinders are like one section of a tree trunk. And we're going to focus on how to draw that texture so that there is a shadow on something that is round. The first technique I'm going to show you is hatching. In hatching, you take short lines. In this situation, they're going to be curved since this object is curved, the cylinder. And these lines need to be close together. In this situation, they're not overlapping. So you can see how that works. So you have the bright light in the middle and then the two cast shadows on the side. Next, we're going to be doing vertical hatching, which is exactly the same thing, only instead of doing horizontally and curved, we're going to do it vertically. In this situation, you can overlap the lines. So you can try doing hatching without overlapping the lines, and this time we're doing it with overlapping the lines. So as you are getting closer to the edge, the lines get closer and closer together, and it creates a darker shadow. Next, let's do a vertical hatching with shorter lines. When you do it with shorter lines, what's happening is it creates a better texture. The long lines are nice, but the long lines make it look like it's smooth. If the object you are drawing has a texture to it, then the shorter lines would probably be a better choice. Same thing. The closer to the edge you are, the closer together the lines would be. I also like to make sure that when I'm drawing the lines, that as I get closer to the middle, that I lift up on my pen just a little bit so that it looks lighter. Remember, that's where the light is hitting it. So going over to the other side and doing the same thing. Now my pen's giving me a little bit of trouble here, but it's still working. So taking that pen and making those vertical lines close together on this side as well, and coming out. Trying not to repeat the same kind of shadow in the middle or going towards the middle so that it looks more realistic. And you can see how this is actually building up texture, so it looks more like bark. Finally, we're going to do scumbling. Now, scumbling is something that I came upon when I was in college. I love to paint with scumbling, especially in the background, but it also creates a wonderful texture. Scumbling is just the process of taking lines and going two different directions with them and then overlapping them, having them be very, very close together. You notice there's not a whole bunch of white showing in this one like in the others, because with scumbling you're filling in more of the space. So scumbling might work on something where it is a darker shadow on the sides and then lighter in the middle. Again, the thing about this is that all four of these textures will work in any situation. You just have to choose the one that you like the best and the one that you think looks the best. Doing the same thing on this as I've done on the others, where I'm coming to the other side, doing the scumbling, having lines going diagonally one way and then diagonally the other way, and then just kind of filling in the area. Closer I get to the edge, the darker the line is going to be. I'm going to draw one more cylinder because I want to show you what it looks like when you take a combination of these textures and put them together. The techniques. So, I'm starting out with some of the short lines. And this time I'm thinking shaggy bark. So as I'm working down, I'm having some of my lines kind of stick out just a little bit. Thinking about what the bark looks like. Again, towards the edge is going to be darker, and as it gets closer to the middle, it's going to be lighter. Now let's see how this will actually look if you are going to draw on a tree. So I am just taking my pen now and drawing the trunk of a tree, more realistic. As we all know, trees are not straight up and down. They have lots of bumps and curves in them, just like this one I'm drawing. Most important when you're drawing a tree like this is to keep that curve on the top and then make the curve on the bottom so that it looks more three-dimensional. Also, on a tree, when you're drawing the branches, there's a section that connects to the tree, and then there's a section that goes on out and has all the branches on it. It's important that that's almost cone-shaped. So it needs to have the lines getting closer and closer together the farther it goes out. On this one on the top, I actually drew a line around where it was connected. I'm going to be covering that up with our contour hatching. When you're drawing branches, allow your pen just to kind of go up and down and around so that you can have these nice bumpy branches. Trees are kind of like clouds. There's no two that are the same. So I'm starting in by doing the shadows that would be around the branches, using some of the techniques we talked about. This is the vertical hatching that we've mentioned. And then over on the other side, I'm using the contour hatching, the hatching that goes around. And then doing that on the branch as well to give it a round appearance, a more three-dimensional appearance instead of flat. You can see the difference between the branches on the top and the branches on the bottom. Now using some of the smaller hatching, the small vertical hatching, and having the hatching go on out to on the branch like we mentioned before. There's a conservation area not too far from my house called Burr Oak Woods, and it has wonderful paths and trails. So my favorite trail is called Bethany Falls. And the reason why I like Bethany Falls is because of the outcrops of limestone that are on it, the wonderful, great, big, huge boulders and pathways that are in between it. They're just gorgeous, and they're a lot of fun to draw. This is the path that I chose to draw. I'm bringing all of my supplies. I have my backpack with my tripod and with my sketchbook. Notice that when I'm sketching today, I'm having my paper taped down to a piece of corrugated plastic. And it's very handy to do it this way because you don't have to worry about a small book. So putting it on my tripod and getting it all together, I'm drawing in a rectangle as to where my drawing is going to be. Getting that done first. This was an absolutely beautiful day when I was there. The sun was shining through the trees. There's a light wind. Not so strong that it would dump my tripod over. This is the view that I'm going to draw. So again, you can see those outcrops of limestone, great big huge boulders that are on the trail. I like the boulders because they have these really interesting lines that come across them. The formations are absolutely incredible. But there's also some trees. Now when I'm drawing this, I am just drawing the main shape. I'm not worried about getting much of the detail done. So that will come later. So I get the main shape of the boulders and then come in with a few lines as to where the trees would be and their location. Now, the most important thing to know when you're doing drawing in plein air is that you do not have to make it look exactly like what you're looking at. Nobody is going to know unless they were there with you. So I like to look to see if there are trees that I might leave out, or if there are things that would be too difficult for me to draw with the perspective, so I just leave those out. And I liked the tree that was there on the right, so I made sure to include that. But there were some other smaller trees that I left out because I knew it was just going to become too busy. In the background, I'm definitely changing. The background is not going to have a whole bunch of trees in it. I'm going to keep it simple, and you'll see how I do that later. I did come in and draw some of the horizontal diagonal lines that are in the boulders that are there because I felt it would be good for me to kind of see how that is going to play out when I start using my graphite stick. I'm also including just a few branches with a few leaves on them in the foreground. I don't need them in the background in some of the other areas just because again, I'm trying to keep it simple. The foreground has the most detail in it, so you want to make sure you're including some simple things. Again, I did not draw all of the branches. I kept it easy so that when I come in with my graphite stick, it'll be easier to draw. So I'm starting with my graphite stick, and what I'm doing first is looking for very dark shadows that I want to put them down first. And there was one dark shadow created by the tree that was on top of the boulder, kind of came down the boulder, that I wanted to start out with first, just because it made a really dark line. And that way it was there and I had it there, and I also want to see how the things around it are going to relate to that line. Now, when you're using a graphite stick, your hands are going to get dirty because it's 100% graphite, and it's like holding the pencil part or the lead part of your pencil, and you know how sometimes that gets your fingers all dirty. But holding it kind of sturdy and just being able to move it easily, I like to let the pencil kind of decide where it's going to go, or the graphite stick. And I also like how easy it is to draw with. Now, since it's so large, it makes nice thick lines, and I can be able to take some of that dark line and paint with it later on when I'm using my water. And that's all it takes. It just takes a brush with water. I did not bring my water brushes for some strange reason, but I did bring some water and a brush that was in my backpack, and that makes it easier. Now I'm coming in and drawing the profile of that one boulder that's sitting there. And you actually walk between these two in the path. It might not look like it in my drawing. And there was a really cool, just little rock that was in the middle of the path that had a nice shadow on the side. You'll notice that I am using hatching more than anything when I'm doing the shading, like up there on the side of the boulder. You can see the vertical hatching that's taking place. And most of the time I'm just drawing loosely. These are natural objects, so since they're natural objects, they're not going to have straight lines. The lines are going to be bumpy. They're going to be varied in thickness, and they are going to definitely show how that boulder or that tree or how the things from nature actually look or attempt to look. Continuing to look with a shadow, doing some more hatching. I also like to do hatching that is diagonal. You can see that there on the bottom. A lot of this hatching is going to disappear when I start doing my water, but it still will serve its purpose. I'm coming in and adding lines right on top of those branches and then drawing the side of the tree. You know, on the bottom of the tree we have some really, really nice roots, and those roots are going to help us identify this as a tree instead of just a great big vertical line. Make sure to include the little details that are going to tell people what they're looking at, especially when it's something kind of abstract as this is. If you've never been to this location, you probably are not going to recognize what these are supposed to be. But they were fun for me since I was in the area. That's one thing you need to do when you're choosing what to draw. Choose something that you enjoy looking at. Choose something that's going to be fun, because that's what this is all about. It's about looking at things, observing things, and drawing them. Doing some more vertical hatching. And now I'm coming up and I'm doing some of the trees that are on top of and behind those boulders. And I like to identify trees with branches coming off of them, even though there may not be a branch there. It helps once again to say, yes, that is a branch, that is a tree, and you can identify it easily. You can see already how dirty my hand is from using the graphite stick. I didn't bring any wet wipes with me, so after I was done I had to definitely wait till I got home to wash my hands. Now I'm working in the background, and with my water I'm going to do something I do when I'm doing watercolors, and that is to show a group of trees just with a wash back there. Looking more closely at the roots of the tree, coming in with some more vertical hatching. This was such a nice day when I was there. Even though it was a little bit cooler, it was probably only about 70 or 68 degrees. and I was in the shade, but lots of people were there running through, and I think somewhere in the video you might see a guy that is on the path running. He runs right past me. Doing some hatching on that rock that's right there in the middle of the path going through, and trying to darken up some of the areas so that when I take my water to it, it'll be very easy to create a nice dark shadow. Now I'm taking my brush, and it doesn't have a whole bunch of water on it. It is damp. And this brush is not a fancy brush. It's not one that I have. It comes with my Plein paints, and so but it is able to have a nice point on it. So I was able to take that damp brush and actually draw with it, and taking it and filling in some of the areas where the shadow is darker, building up the contrast. One of my favorite things about drawing outdoors is the sounds. I know some artists that take their earbuds with them and listen to music, but I love the sound of the wind. In this situation, I wasn't too far from a road. Every once in a while I hear the traffic, but the sound of the wind running through the trees and the rustling of the leaves is one of the best sounds. Very relaxing, and probably one of the reasons why I enjoy painting outdoors and drawing outdoors. I'm going to begin our alternative technique section with a drawing. In looking at my resource photo, I can see lots of trees. So I'm going to outline some of the bushes, get the basic shape down, and then with the trees, I like to draw just a line to show the shape of the trunk and then where some of the branches come out. I don't want to have too much pencil on here, because after I do my drawing with my ink, the pencil might show up. The first alternate technique that you could use when you're drawing in plein air is using a water-soluble pen and a water brush. Now take the water-soluble pen, and it can be any pen. Flare pen works really well. And this is a brush pen that I have. You would not have to have a brush pen, but any kind of pen that has water-soluble ink will work. I'm coming in and I'm outlining some of the tree branches, getting my drawing done first. And then I'm going to take my water brush and add the shadows and some details. When you use a water brush, you just have to be careful not to squeeze it too hard because then you'll have a big drip of water. So before you attempt to do a drawing with a water brush, you need to probably practice. What I'm doing here is I'm focusing in on the shadow by painting over with my water, painting over the ink, and then trying to paint in where there would be a shadow on this bush. It helps to start with something small and get the idea of it. Sometimes pens that are water soluble do not have as much ink per se that you can paint or draw with. This specific pen had a lot, so the ink was able to really liquefy and turn into paint that I could use for the trees and for my landscape. But it's a lot of fun to try, a lot of fun to use, and I tend to go to this one a lot when I'm out. I keep a water brush and a pen in my backpack so that when I'm out and I want to do a drawing, I can do it very quickly with this. The secret will be to look at where the shadows are. Find out where your light source is. Also, the less ink you have on your brush that you're using, the lighter that the lines are going to be. So keep that in mind as you are working on this, that the darker areas are going to be the shadows. You don't want to outline everything just by going over it because then it's going to look kind of funny. But then again, look where that light source is and then build up your shadow on the opposite side. Now the places where I just have one line there for the branch, I'm coming back in and drawing the other side of the branch. You can use the ink just like you would use paint. You can go back in where there's a lot of ink and grab some onto the water brush. I also love to paint leaves with this because if you just kind of take some of the lighter colors, the lighter ink, and you can just dab onto the paper with it and just kind of create some groupings of leaves. It's a lot of fun to do. But I would consider, practicing first before you jump right in and try this. But it is a nice alternative to just using a pencil or just using ink. So this is ink, but it does something a lot of fun. Our second alternative technique is a stick and ink drawing. And you may be thinking, stick, why would I want to use a stick when I have a pen or something more controllable to use? And that's exactly the reason why, is because sometimes the ink on the stick kind of does its own thing. It's great for when you're painting branches because, as you can see, when you're painting with it, the branches kind of want to do their own thing. They go all different directions as you are drawing with them. It's also nice to create a texture with it because of the edge of the stick. The stick makes a really wonderful texture. In fact, I really like on this drawing, I like the bushes better because I was able to create that texture more than I was with the water soluble pen and the water brush. The one thing you have to be careful about with the stick and the ink is that you don't use too much ink on it, and you also want to be careful about using or dipping too much ink onto the stick. You want to have enough that, you're just going to have to make a couple more lines and then dip it back into the ink as you're using it. This ink that I'm using is called Noodler's ink. You could just use regular India ink if you wanted to, and you go somewhere that it's going to be easy for you to wipe up because this is permanent. And if it spills over and gets on things, it's going to be a huge mess. So just watch it as you're working. I know when I was in college and doing a lot of ink drawings and doing it with a dip pen, that sometimes I would drip onto the table and it would stain. So you may want to put something down on the table as you're working with the ink so that you don't have to have that problem. As I am drawing some of the trees that are more in the background, the stick can create a lighter value because you've got less ink on there, and you can very carefully kind of scratch up and down and make it lighter so it looks like it's going back in the distance. I chose to do a split drawing so you can just compare the two. These are the two that I would use the most. I also use something called a dip pen. I mentioned it earlier. However, I have talked about that on another video, so I didn't want to take some time on this video to do that one again. But dip pens are wonderful to draw with as well. Well, I hope that you enjoyed our class. And to help you remember some of the main concepts, I've got some questions for you. First of all, why is a viewfinder helpful? Second, what was one supply that I highly recommend that you can use especially if you're drawing in plein air? Next, what was the most common shading technique when drawing? And finally, what were the two water-soluble supplies that I mentioned in class? A viewfinder is helpful because it allows you to choose what to draw, and it breaks it down into what we know as the rule of thirds. What is the one supply recommended if you are drawing in plein air? That would be micron pens. The most commonly used shading technique when drawing is hatching. The two water-soluble mediums that were mentioned were water-soluble graphite sticks and sketch and wash pencils. Now that you've had a chance to learn a little bit more about drawing in plein air, I hope that you will practice some of the things that I've taught you, the different techniques, the different mediums. So pick up some paper and a pen or pencil and get started.